Hello everyone and welcome back to INclusiverse. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Kaleda. I'm joined by my other incredible host, Nick Hamilton.
Hi there.
How are you?
Not bad, thank you. Yourself?
I'm very well, thank you. And I'm very, very excited for this episode because this is all dedicated to you and your story. And it's really important, I think, that you have so much to share and so much for people to understand. And it's an inspirational story. And, you know, we mentioned those inwards in the introduction episode. And, you know, this story truly is inspiring. You're an absolutely incredible individual that has so much that you can share. So I'm really looking forward to hear more about you. So I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let you tell me more about your story.
I won't go into too much detail. I'll go into as much as I can with the time that we have. But I will start. I was born 2 months premature. I was diagnosed with spastic diplegia, which is a form of cerebral palsy. Now, cerebral palsy is like an umbrella of loads of different types of conditions. You've got tons of different conditions, so it affects so many different people in so many different ways. I have diaplegia, which is two limbs. You have hemiplegia, which is like down one side, so it's just affecting one side of a person. Then it can get as serious, not being able to feed yourself, not being able to walk, being constantly reliant on a helper or in a wheelchair. And so I now class myself as, one of the lucky ones. I'm able to walk and do whatever I wanted to do. But it wasn't initially like that. So when I was born, I wasn't breathing. I was whisked away into an incubator. I was in an incubator for 6 weeks. My parents didn't think I would make it. Fortunately, I did. And then I wasn't really progressing like a normal able-bodied child. I wasn't able to stand, wasn't able to take my first steps. So I wasn't diagnosed at this age, at this time. So my parents just looked at each other thinking, wow, there's something not really right with our son. So they took me back to the hospital 18 months or so later. So I was 18 months old and they diagnosed me with CP. They said that I would never be able to walk and that I was born with a squint, so I have a lazy eye. So when I'm looking at you, Kally, you might think I'm not, but I really am. They said that I would severely deteriorate as I got older. So it wasn't looking very fruitful for me as a child. And there's so many parents out there that are given this sort of information of your son or daughter is disabled and their future doesn't look bright. My parents were one of those, and they obviously had my brother, who is 7.5 years older than me, even though he acts 7.5 years younger than me most of the time. I'm definitely the most mature, better looking, and more talented, or most talented out of the both of us.
Absolutely.
Obviously,
Always
that's why
great.
I'm on this podcast.
Yeah.
But obviously he's fully able-bodied, and my parents had never had a disabled son before, and it's not like you can go to a library, pick up a book and learn more about how to bring up a child with CP or any disability. So my parents had to just hit and hope, and it was all about trial and error, really. I think they collectively came together to make my life as tough as possible and not wrap me up in cotton wool. So I basically had to learn to have this disabled body, but live in an able-bodied world. And my parents never allowed me to take the easy route. So my dad is a pretty hardcore guy. He's West Indian, and he's very well versed in tough love. So he was always shouting at me, being like, "Nick, pick up your feet. Stop falling over. Why are you doing all of this?" I'd be like, "Dad, I'm like 4 years old. And I don't even know what I've got in terms of a condition." And initially when I first started with my condition, my legs were constantly bent, so I could only stand on my tiptoes. And I could never really take a step. Every time I tried to take a step, I was that tight. The spasticity in the muscles, it almost felt like someone was trying to push me back almost. I could never clear the floor with my right leg. So I was just falling over, hitting my head all the time, always finding the corner of something, the corner of my dad's hi-fi system or my mum's plant pot. I felt like I was just bleeding to death. And my parents, as long as I hadn't broken an arm or a leg, they just would look in the opposite direction and walk off. So I grew up feeling like they didn't love me. But really it was because they needed me to be as independent as possible. So then I went to schooling. I went to an able-bodied school. My parents didn't want me to go to a disabled school or a school for disabled people. So I grew up around able-bodied people, but it was tough because I didn't understand who I was. I didn't understand why I was different. I was never accepted. Kids were always staring at me, making me look different, making me feel like I was some sort of alien, laughing at me, joking about me. And I was the only person of colour at both of my schools, at my primary school and my secondary school. So it was like a double whammy almost for me, and at 8 years old, I was always already questioning my purpose. Why me? Why have I been given this disability? Because I think it's 1 in 500 births now diagnosed with CP, and I just wanted to be like all my other friends who were all able-bodied, and they were all white. So I just wanted to be like them because I felt like I was the only disabled person I've ever seen before. I'd never seen another disabled person at all. So I felt like I was the only disabled person in the world at the time. So I felt super isolated. But my parents always sheltered me from any racial issues that I had. And then obviously with my brother being who he is, which is 7-time Formula World champion, Sir Lewis Hamilton, which is obviously not a big deal. I grew up around motorsport. Motorsport was my life, but I was trying to overcome this condition. I couldn't walk long distances, and the world is an able-bodied world. It doesn't really make allowances for disabled people. Able-bodied people think they do, but they really don't. Some of them do, and some of them really help disabled people, which is a massive bonus for us. But really, for us, we got to figure out a way where we feel more at ease, and I did that through being in a wheelchair because I couldn't walk long distances, and it really helped me. But then I started getting bullied when I was 15. People coming up behind me, pulling me backwards in my wheelchair and making me feel really rubbish. And yeah, it was a real tough period of time for me because I needed this wheelchair to continue in my life. And I wanted to start getting a girlfriend, and I wanted to feel loved, but I didn't feel like I would ever be loved in a wheelchair because all these kids were just staring at me and making me feel rubbish. And all these so-called cool kids were getting the real fit girls at school, and they're all going out and having a drink and a laugh, and I just couldn't do any of that. So long story short, I got to 16 and I was growing a beard. I was ripped. I was really buff because I was pushing my body weight constantly every day. And this lady, we were going to a race with Lewis, and she was checking us in at this airport, and she didn't look at me at all. She just looked at my mum and said, "Mrs. Hamilton, can your son, does he require any assistance? Can he walk stairs? Can he do this? Can he do that?" And she never looked at me as an individual, as a person myself. So I sort of blamed myself because I was like, well, I'm only in this wheelchair because I feel like I can't walk long distances, but I really can. If I really put my mind to it. Now, I initially could only stand on my tiptoes when I was a kid, but I was given a life-changing operation to basically extend the tendons in the back of my legs. It's called a tendon release. So they went in the back of the hamstrings, back of the ankles, and the groin. So I was able to stand up when I was 16, but I just didn't have the mental strength to push through. And I decided that I was never going to be in my wheelchair ever again if that meant that able-bodied people would just look through me all the time. So, I haven't been in my wheelchair now for 16 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and just always wanted to race, but didn't think I'd ever be able to race. Ended up getting an opportunity to potentially drive a car. I did really well at it. I won't go into detail of how, but I ended up then training 3 hours a day to race against able-bodied people, and I put my body through a lot of torture and pain. I've got scoliosis in the spine, so I pop ribs on a daily basis, and my pelvis moves out of line, all that sort of stuff. But I always wanted to race. Racing was my thing. And so I dedicated my life to my motorsport. And in 2015, I became the first disabled athlete ever to compete in the British Touring Car Championship. The British Touring Car Championship is the pinnacle of British motorsport.
That's an incredible achievement.
Thank you.
Like amazing achievement.
Yeah, and I'm the only disabled athlete in the field, so I like to class myself as like a Paralympian in the Olympics. And so, it's hard work because I do all of the finance and sponsorship and everything myself. Everybody thinks because of who my brother is that he would pay for that to happen, but he really doesn't. He has offered, but I want to do it all on my own and feel like I've earned my position and my right to be there as my own individual. So now I race in the British Touring Car Championship. Been there now for 5. I'm in my 5th season. 2020 I became the first disabled athlete to score points in the series, and then that was I finished 15th to do that, and 2 weeks ago I finished 6th in the first round of the championship, which was pretty incredible for me to do so well. So continuing to move forward, but using my motorsport as an anchor to show people what you can do with a disability, and almost to put your middle finger up to some of the doctors that just perceive that, oh my God, you've got a disabled son or daughter, your life's over. And now I've realized that now I'm here to share my experiences to help people that were in the position of my parents, who were parents of a disabled person, thinking, God, how the hell are we going to bring him up? What's he going to look like when he's 31 years old? What's his life going to look like? And so I'm just here to share my experiences and inspire other people to make the best of a bad bunch sometimes, and you're dealt a certain hand and you've got to do what you can with it. So through this podcast, I'll be sharing more experiences from myself, but also learning a lot from other people as well, and trying to help society and everyone in the world understand disability a little bit better, because there's a lot of disabled people that don't want to talk about it. They're very scared to open up, and there's no question that you could ask me that would upset me. It's all about asking anything you want, and I'll give you an honest answer. So yeah, a little bit about me.
Wow. I mean, that's the first time kind of we've been in this environment, and to hear you talk so openly and talk about some things that are quite difficult to hear, and must have been even more difficult for you to kind of deal with growing up. I'm really appreciate it, and I'm sure the listeners will as well, how open and how honest you have been. You mentioned in our introduction episode that mental health is something that's really important to you. How has having CP affected your mental health, from like being a kid and seeing all these able-bodied people and not really understanding what's going on, to now being a very, very accomplished and successful British racing car driver?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't really realize until quite recently, and quite recently is because I've been very open to mental health. I've been to multiple different psychologists, doing different techniques, etc., etc. I've done EMDR, which is based around trauma, which I would 100% recommend for everybody. I think everybody should at least have a go a little bit with EMDR. It's incredible. But now I'm in therapy now, and I have an amazing relationship with my therapist. And the more I sit and I just talk about myself, the more I realize how much of an impact my disability actually had on my mental state as a young kid, that I carried with me for such a long time. You can so easily go through life thinking, no, I'm totally fine. There's nothing wrong with me mentally. I'm not upset. I'm really happy. But I'm going to be open and honest and say that I was a really lonely person. I felt very lonely and isolated as a disabled person. My mum, I'm a huge mummy's boy. I absolutely love and adore my mum. She understands absolutely everything there is to understand with my condition. And I've always said that, but also she doesn't actually have to live with it.
Yeah.
So
it's the difference, right?
She can help you as much as she can, but then she doesn't actually live with it on a daily basis. And I've realized that even though my family have been absolutely incredible in terms of helping me and supporting me and guiding me, I'm still very lonely I'm the only one that has to go through the physical pain, the mental pain, the struggle of not being able to walk or get up a step, or just being completely shut out from people. And so it really has taken its toll, but I've learned so much through my life now as a 31-year-old that I'm super strong at my core, with anything to do with my disability, that no one really can knock me off my center. I've got such a good relationship with myself, but a good relationship with my disability as well. And I know my limitations, what I can, what I can't do. And I accept that I'm different, and I'm proud to be different, and I'm proud to be unique, because I think that's super important. And I'm proud and open to talk about, how I've been feeling in the past, and really, I got to a stage when I was, I don't know, I'm 31, so when I was 23, I preferred being asleep than being awake sometimes. Just I felt like if I go to sleep, I don't have to deal with it anymore, and no one can get to me, you know. And then when you wake up in the morning, you're like, another day of it, you know, how do we move forward? And you just don't feel like there's any light at the end of the tunnel. But I've got through it, and I'm so proud to have got through that moment, and you know, I'm living proof of going through some dark times like everybody has in the world, and everyone does on a daily basis, you know, to try and inspire people to keep plowing forward.
Your story is just so inspirational, and I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface of everything that you've kind of been through.
Yeah, it's very deep. It can go a lot deeper.
Yeah.
But look, I'm just one of millions and billions and trillions of people that have a story, you know. I'm no different or any better than anybody else here. Yourself, Kally, as well, you know, everybody has a story. But for some reason, everyone wants to listen to mine. But my story isn't any more special than anybody else. I've just realized, you know, through EMDR as well, I did EMDR, through EMDR, you know, I had an epiphany and realized that, okay, the reason of why I am this way and why I have this disability is to be a voice for other people, because I'm so open and honest, and yeah, I've achieved some really cool things. You know, I can now be a role model, even though I never wanted to be a role model. I didn't plan to be a role model, but I'm now a person that people can look up to and think, yeah, my disabled son or daughter with CP or any disability could potentially be a racing car driver or get involved in motorsport or whatever. And he's being open about mental health and situations of feeling really low and at some cases, you know, suicidal, and realizing that you can get through all of that and be okay. So yeah, I mean, I'm not that special at all, not special at all. I'm just myself. But yeah, I'm here to inspire as many people as I can as I'm on this planet.
That's amazing. And for listeners that don't know, what is EMDR?
So EMDR, I mean, I don't know the details of it because I'm not a psychologist. But it's basically a technique through tapping. And so you go into, you know, a mindfulness state in your session, and your therapist starts asking you questions about, you know, a certain scenario or situation that you've been in the past. And for me, it was one of my racing accidents. I had a huge accident when I was 19. I hit this barrier at 120 mile an hour, knocked myself out on impact. I had a massive traumatic state around this whole situation, and got to a point of how you felt in that scenario, in that position. You know, did you feel, you know, lots of things were coming out with, like, you know, I was feeling like I could potentially die, or the car was going to go on fire, or all that sort of stuff. And you end up, you know, tapping through all these difficult feelings and situations that you felt, and then get to a point where you can reprogram your mind into a more positive state and be like, okay, so let's say I crashed at this circuit called Thruxton. So it's like, okay, so you crashed at this circuit called Thruxton. You know, it was very traumatic. You felt like you could potentially kill yourself or kill other bloody marshals or all that sort of stuff. But what would it be in a positive state? And then you start retraining your mind and your brain. And it got to a point, you know, it found me like 2 seconds of lap time by the time I got there the next year. So, yeah, very, 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 very powerful.
Wow. Honestly, the more that you speak, the more I'm just inspired. It's crazy. I look at you and listen to you so intently. You know, I really appreciate you sharing, even if it is just kind of a brief overview of your story. And I feel like we're going to unpack more of that as we move into our kind of later episodes of INclusiverse, especially. And it kind of encompasses those inwards that we talked about in our introduction episode. So we talk about inspiring, individual, incredible. You certainly fit all of those words and so much more. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I'm so excited for the next episode. Thank you to our listeners for listening to us talk for the last 20 minutes or so. You can catch us on all of your favorite streaming platforms, as well as heading over to brandpartnershipgroup.com/INclusiverse to submit any questions, suggest future episode topics, and also apply to appear as one of our guests. Nick, thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you very much too.